A big vulnerability, I look at products and services and vendors and I read their marketing. I'm like, wow, can that really do that for my business? And I have to go and do a deep dive and do my research and validate and, make sure that I'm bringing on the right product or service or vendor for the company. Overlays exacerbates that because when a client is in legal risk, has a small budget, has a disparate team or internal team, no working knowledge of accessibility, and they really cannot understand all the moving pieces together, the overlays look very attractive.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Future Foundations podcast. I'm your host, Rob Wiltsey, and I'm here today with Daryn Harpaz of Zenith. And today we're going to be talking about ADA compliance. And I know this is like everyone's favorite topic or whatever. ADA compliance is one of those things that it never feels like the right day to make that a priority. But as we're going to talk about today, it should absolutely be a priority in your business. And Daryn is the guy to help you do that. So Daryn, thank you so much for being on the pod today.
Great to be here. Glad we're having the chat. And yeah, I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you. Yeah,
so let's get right into it. How should companies think about ADA compliance in 2026?
Let's get into it. Great question. So look, a decade ago when we started, I would have answered this question very differently. But accessibility is changing. There is, it's still, the conversation still very much is around compliance and we talk about risk. But I'm seeing it shifting to more about organizations being able to design systems that work for human diversity at scale. It's a different conversation. This takes us from the typical conversation of risk and compliance into a more human-centered conversation, which is where I think, we start to really move this conversation across, what we call civilization, across humanity. But look, life, culture, commerce, we're moving online drastically. I mean, you can't separate it. And so accessibility just becomes essential infrastructure. And if you look at it through that lens, it's not a checkbox. It's not something you do as part of a one-time project. It is essential to the infrastructure that powers how we consume digital content and, transact business online.
Right. And in your experience, how do businesses treat ADA compliance? Is it something that you find that they're pretty proactive about, or is it a bit of an afterthought, or what do you see on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's across the board, of course, depending on the size of the organization. The reality is small companies or small teams can certainly, if they have a focus on accessibility, implement accessibility a little easier. Larger teams are going to struggle, of course, because you have a much larger, more complex, more enterprise environment. But when digital systems fail, it's not usually a people problem. It's usually a process problem, right? If accessibility is part of the first pixel down, if accessibility is part of the company culture and how processes drive through design, development, and go to market and how the end consumer is consuming, then organizations can have a different conversation. It's about integrating accessibility into the matrix, the process matrix, as opposed to the reactive, we've been sued, this wasn't a priority. How do we fix, what do we do? And you get very different outcomes when you're going at something from a reactive perspective versus, we're now in the state of how do we make our systems better? How do our end users consume our product?
Yeah, interesting. And when do most organizations reach out to you for compliance help? Is it because they're trying to be proactive, or like you said, is it because maybe there was some lawsuit or some problem and they went, gosh, we have to pay attention to our ADA compliance?
We are definitely seeing a percentage shift of organizations being more proactive. Just even a few short years ago, 3-4 years ago, predominantly most of our customers came to us after receiving a demand letter or a lawsuit, or having been sued more than once from using overlays, which we'll talk about in just a moment. We're seeing a healthy shift towards more of a proactive, initiative. We're probably 40% of our clients right now are coming to us getting ahead of, the compliance, the risk, but also truly interested in how to implement accessibility as a best practice across the organization. So definitely a shift in change across the board here, which is lovely to see. And we can certainly talk more about how organizations are tackling this in reality, boots on the ground, as we move through our conversation today.
Absolutely. That's super interesting. So tell me about, I'm actually curious to kind of take a step back. So when did you first get into ADA compliance, and how did you actually arrive in with this business doing this kind of work for businesses?
The origin story.
Yeah.
So, we're at, this is our 10-year anniversary this month, so it's quite a journey. And I think of this conversation a decade ago. Wow. I would say for the first 2 or 3 years, I was really trying to convince customers that this was something they really need to pay attention to. I feel like my perspective has shifted drastically. I used to think of this as like I found a niche, and I was kind of on the fringe of the industry here, but really I see it now as identifying where I was noticing these digital systems failing people, right? At the time, I had a web agency, a digital agency doing traditional web and mobile. We're doing a large redesign for behavioral health services company. And I remember during that project becoming aware of how systems were not performing, digital systems not performing for particularly the blind use case. And started looking around the marketplace and realizing that this was hugely underserved, and there was no real conversation happening at the intersection of design, development, and accessibility. And so I essentially rebranded the company that week. We came back as a accessibility first consultancy, and focused exclusively on that, and haven't looked back ever since. So that is all we do. We are certainly accessibility purists, and from the very first day, we committed to not only being a mission-driven organization, but building across the construct that you can never decouple the human element from the accessibility equation. So even as automation becomes more prevalent and we start to use AI and we start to look at ways to optimize with code, we will always keep this a human-centered conversation and have real-world users testing our solutions for the marketplace to the degree that it is within line and meets the values of how Zenith does accessibility.
And why should organizations make accessibility more of a priority? Like if there's someone listening to this and they're like, oh yeah, accessibility, okay, like that seems like something we should eventually get around to. Why should they really make that a priority today and not wait for something to some sort of legal event to happen or something? Like what is there an opportunity for these businesses that they may be missing by being really proactive with ADA compliance now?
Yeah, this can open up a nice conversation here. Just to kind of frame this up a little bit. Look, organizations need to move much faster today. We can tool rapidly because of access to how quickly tech stacks and apps are being developed, and AI is helping us do that. Tools change, teams change, content changes. With all this rapid change, it's just accessibility breaks more frequently, more often. It's because ownership and processes aren't clear. So we refer to this as the break-fix life cycle. It's very reactive. An organization hasn't prioritized accessibility. It's not on their roadmap. Their teams are disparate, right? Meaning if there is accessibility training happening, it's not happening across the design team, the content team, the developers, the product owners, the go-to-market team. So usually when there is a lawsuit, it gets isolated to compliance or legal, right? And then design and IT are not part of that loop. So when organizations realize that when there is a lawsuit, there's an impact to their brand, it takes massive time and resources, both energetically and financially, to tackle these things. When you are sued, it is not public record, so you are essentially on the chopping block. You have a very predatory mechanism in the marketplace from the over litigious plaintiff attorneys, who are certainly fueling that side of the equation. So you don't want to be an organization that's just reacting to compliance risk while you're missing out on this kind of ability to mature your organization with, human-centered conversation about technology. But you're also not catering to significant demographics. I mean, it's the disability community and it's the aging community as well. We are increasingly an aging civilization. What's the stat, Rob? I think it's for the first time in history, we are seeing globally more of our population over the age of 74 than under the age of 14.
Whoa, that's amazing.
It's significant. Yeah. And in terms of trends, we're having more of the aging population going back to education, getting online, taking classes, taking courses, these long distance learning platforms and SaaS platforms for education. We're catering to this change in how our population consumes digital content. So it's not about disability anymore. It's about serving the entire, variety, which we call the spectrum of our society, right? So it's the conversation has been, it's the right thing to do, but it's no longer just centered on that. Organizational maturity and how we develop and deliver our products can't be decoupled from how the culture and community are consuming our products.
Absolutely. And it seems like there's so much more going on now with ADA compliance other than checking a legal checkbox or some sort of, legal mandate. It's really about serving your customers best. And to your point, there's a lot of demographics that really get value out of ADA compliance. What does Zenith do? How does Zenith work? Tell us a little bit about Zenith and your process and your services and how it works, so people can kind of understand what a service like yours does to affect change in these companies.
Yeah, I'd love to chat about that for a moment. Thank you for asking. So Zenith is what we term, full end-to-end accessibility, meaning that we get involved with the first pixel down, helping our customers, design for accessibility. We have time and time again identified and noticed that errors in UI UX compound exponentially across the entire workflow and life cycle of software product development. To decouple that on the back end could cost an organization 300 to 400%, in premium and more. The average cost to design with accessibility from the ground up, staggeringly, is only about 30%.
Wow.
In additional cost. It's not significant, right? So Zenith realizes this, and we come into an organization, and we really help organizations focus on building accessibility into how they work, what actually happens when their products are consumed. It's not just about fixing pages, right? It's about designing systems that hold up over time. So organizations that are maturing need to scale rapidly. When there's more people and more processes, there's more opportunity for things to break and go wrong. And so you have to have a mature process along that path, and one of our, the way we come into an organization and integrate that process to help companies scale with accessibility as a foundation, as a core, is really, how we differentiate. We also are building very heavily for the kind of e-commerce, marketplace, the vertical. Shopify is, a platform that we are very much focused on in terms of delivering reusable and accessible themes and components. Another way to help organizations with scale and maturity is to give them access to reusable, accessible code, templates, and tools that they can leverage. So being able to play on both the product and the service side is, of course, very helpful to an organization. We definitely have a fair bit of our customers still coming to us after the lawsuit, and unfortunately, and I'll just address this now in the conversation, being sued more than once. The statistics are for Zenith specifically, over 70% of our customers have received a lawsuit. Over 40% of our customers have received more than one lawsuit. And of those customers, half have been sued by using an overlay. So it's a pretty frightening numbers.
And can you explain what the overlay is for those that might not know?
Yeah. An overlay is essentially, JavaScript code that executes in a browser once a web page has rendered in the browser, and it manipulates in the rendered layer according to some rule sets on how it believes accessibility should be presented to the end user, in a browsing session. The challenge is that real accessibility can't be switched on and off, right? If you take the overlay away, you're back to ground zero, no adjustment to your, no foundational accessibility. And the reality is that plaintiff attorneys are still very much targeting overlays as a non-compliant solution. So there are certainly some smaller businesses which might not have a brand or a revenue with these plaintiff attorneys are going to be pursuing, but the risk is exponential.
So people are using overlays thinking this is good enough, this is putting us in compliance, and actually it could be a big vulnerability for their business.
A big vulnerability, caveat emptor, marketing is a machine. I myself I look at products and services and vendors and I read their marketing. I'm like, wow, can that really do that for my business? And I have to go and do a deep dive and do my research and validate and, make sure that I'm bringing on the right product or service or vendor for the company. Overlays exacerbates that because when a client is in legal risk, has a small budget, has a disparate team or no internal team, no working knowledge of accessibility, and they really cannot understand all the moving pieces together, the overlays look very attractive. They're affordable, they're low cost, they make wildly exaggerated claims. One line of code, 100% compliance in 5 minutes, it's compelling.
Yeah.
So, buyers have to be aware across the board. Often pain is the greatest motivator, as we know, and sometimes, this is unfortunately just where we're intersecting, having these conversations with our clients.
Yeah, and you mentioned AI earlier. What are the different implications now that we're in the age of AI with ADA compliance, both with, can AI play a role in improving ADA compliance? Are there also new risks because of AI in the world of ADA compliance?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're certainly leveraging AI in interesting ways in our business. We can help to write some marketing content on the low end of the spectrum, do a little research. The development team are doing really well at writing rule sets and guiding, having AI guide them through some specific complex coding sequences, but you have to have the skill on the back end to take that output and be like, does this work, right? So AI is very good at finding patterns, right? I think the mistake is that people don't realize it can't understand context, right? Context and lived experiences. This is the great debate of AI and sentient, like the sentient concept of where it starts to take over and how it blends. I think accessibility improves when AI supports human judgment. Wonderful. Let's use it to help us elevate on that level, right? But the responsibility for that has to stay with the human. And I think that's where these tools and the promises of AI doing these quick fixes breaks, because it takes the responsibility away from the human. And now who's accountable? You know?
Yeah, that's interesting. And it seems like the human accountability is key. AI is also, I think, playing a role in helping people that are litigious and want to sue companies. I think it's helping them actually identify companies that are out of compliance. Is that part of the equation as well?
Yeah, we are noticing a huge uptick in lawsuits filed, and some courts are certainly getting wise to this. Some judges are completely dismissing AI-generated lawsuits and saying this is not valid, and they're just kind of dismissing those as they're submitted because they can see they're not legitimate. Done legitimately, but the suit's now being filed. It might have been filed, via full automation, but it's still public record. Now we're back to the same conversation. Your risk profile has expanded. You're on the chopping block once again. But yes, it is helping. It feels rather dark, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's definitely affecting everything across the board. What are there certain industries right now that should be paying extra attention to ADA compliance because of shifts in their industry, or because of you mentioned aging populations? Like, what are some specific industries that really need to pay special attention to this right now?
Yeah. So we just can break the market down into both the public and the private sector. On the public side, rulemaking is solid. There's legislation across the board. Government agencies are scrambling to get into compliance. The reason I mention that is because there's the trickle down to the vendors that need to be in compliance with, as they deliver and procure on these contracts. Vendors often have subs, so those subs need to be compliant. Often customers use some of these vendors that are delivering to, federal contracts as well. And so it trickles down to the private sector through that, through that relationship. But in terms of the private sector, education, because of, the fact that everyone's going online and learning, and the aging population is going back into education as well. Healthcare. There is a very large healthcare bill, or accessibility bill, a measure, I should say, that has officially passed. We have healthcare clients, and they are very much definitely trying to scramble to get into, in line for meeting these deadlines as well. So those are three that I spoke about. And then I think, primarily e-commerce, the e-commerce space is certainly high profile, because this is how we sell and consume and conduct our commerce online. Just to shift away from the conversation for a moment, just think about the extremity and the on one side the extremity, and the side the magnificence of a blind user shopping online. No monitor, no mouse, a screen reader, converting a visual user experience into an auditory user experience. Just think of like the art and science, technology, and like the humanness around just that use case alone. When I talk about it, I can feel it as an emotion, and we can identify industries and verticals, and and these conversations are very useful and necessary. But I also am speaking to my customers about, like, think about the demographic you're serving. What does it feel like? You know, I think it's also a lovely part of the conversation to be having.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, speaks to what I've been thinking about as well as the big opportunity that businesses have across the board, but especially like e-commerce and education and things like you mentioned. It's so much about creating a phenomenal user experience. And if a huge part of your, or if any part of your customer base needs that accessibility, then the company should be motivated to do this out of a sense of empathy for their customers, not a sense of, we got to protect ourselves, we got to do what's required. I think that paradigm shift, like you mentioned, it seems like it's happening out there to a greater degree.
Yes, accessibility now becomes less about an accommodation and more about participation, right? Equal.
Yeah, that's really well said. And what is the process like? I mean, if someone's listening to this and they're going, yeah, this is making a lot of sense, they've had a bit of an aha moment, like how long does the process take? What's involved? Kind of going end to end through their business and through their content and making sure that they're delivering the right experience to their customers.
Well, yeah, let's talk about this for a moment. There's different use cases here. Certainly, if someone is getting ready to redesign or re-platform, it is the best time, the perfect intersection to have this conversation. The earlier we get involved and the sooner we interface, integrate accessibility as a best practice, a process, a workflow into the redesign or rebuild, the smoother, less friction, and the lower cost the entire process is going to be. So that's like the best use case scenario right there. You're getting ready to redesign, getting ready to re-platform, freshen up your brand, add new functionality. Great time to do it, especially if you are on Shopify, because you can leverage our accessible Shopify theme and our accessible Shopify components. We've built an enterprise grade Shopify reusable theme component architecture, same code base, multiple brands, multiple sites. It's quite powerful. So that's a good place to have the conversation. And then the other side of the equation is you want to get ahead of the risk or you've been sued. It's the same path forward. There needs to be a full audit conducted on the digital asset, whether it's web, mobile, or web app. The audit informs the severity of defects against the WCAG success criteria, and then there is a remediation plan put in place. We're either stepping in and helping, and delivering end to end, fixing the code for the client, or we are providing guidance, oversight, support, training to their teams to help them implement our recommendations. After that, the process is pretty standard. There's a retest. We go in and we develop the accessibility statements. If a client is requesting a VPAT, it's something we call an accessibility conformance report for the industry, we can certainly develop that content. And then it just goes into a monthly compliance and monitoring where we're just making sure they maintain their accessibility. And usually there's ongoing training, or some clients want to tap into our marketplace of accessible product and reusable codes. And so it's quite a straightforward process, but it requires the precision of working with teams and bringing everybody together to be on the same page. And really just having teams be accountable at the level of their roles for accessibility. If someone's pushing to production, they need to have enough accessibility knowledge for their role, right?
Interesting. Yeah, so making sure that your team is all rowing in the same direction with regard to accessibility and what the customer experience should be, so that everyone is treating that with the same level of importance as well. I think that like you said, a lot of times accessibility can kind of be relegated to certain departments in your company, but it should really be something that there should be like an understanding across your whole organization about the role that this plays in the customer experience.
Yeah, definitely. I think this takes us back to the conversation of culture versus systems. Right. We spoke about this briefly earlier. I mean, culture sets intention. Like, we intend to build our company and come to market this way, but systems determine outcomes. Like, determine the outcome of that, of that process. So values without workflows don't often scale very well. Like, you can have great values, but you can have really bad workflows. And how are you scaling that, right? So I think in context of this, accessibility has to be embedded into more than just incentives. It really has to be the process. It's how you embed it into the way we get work done. Like, you can't decouple the two. It's integrated, right?
Man, I love values without workflows don't scale very well. You could definitely quote that.
Yeah.
That's a great insight, because, like you said, culture is the thing where everyone shares the value, everyone's on the same page, but you have to actually systematize that, or it doesn't really express itself very, very well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, look, you hear of product design, like designing for the ideal user. There is no ideal user. Like, the users are a spectrum, right?
Right. And if you're only designing around this target user, almost no one is the target user, right? It's a target. People are like closer and farther.
Yeah, it's an imaginary. It's like an imagined average user.
Yep. Yeah,
Right?
it's somebody's probably exactly the average user, but most people are probably some distance away from that bullseye, right?
Well, yeah, it's a wide spectrum. It's a wide spectrum of ability. It's a wide spectrum of context. It's a varied environment. I think the biggest myth in digital design is this idea of a normal user.
That's really interesting. That definitely causes the wrong decisions to get made, or the wrong way of looking at it. Like, you have your client base, your customer base, I should say, depending on your business, is a spectrum, and designing for the normal user is actually pretty suboptimal. You have to really capture the whole target in some way, right? Not just the bullseye, as I usually say, right? And do you have any case studies do you have any stories that come to mind about a company that, really took their accessibility seriously, and just like the benefits that had, like maybe some like surprising benefits that had in their company, and what the outcome was,
Oh yeah, three are coming to mind in different scenarios. One in particular, a non-profit that receives funding for the work they do, needed to make sure that all of their content, they produce a lot of video content, was accessible. And through us working with them, building a custom accessible video player, making sure that processes from the very beginning to the very end, scaled with accessibility as a core foundation. They were able to, continue receiving their grant money and to grow and scale because of how they implemented for their mission-driven approach to the marketplace. And so that's the social impact side of the equation, right? A use case in terms of like compliance and risk. When a company has a mandate because there's a legal ruling coming down the pipeline and they have to get ready or be fined, I mean, on a federal level, and they have a large, it's a big ship. They got to turn this thing around, and they got to, cater to many parts of the moving pieces. When they can meet a deadline and the executive team can sign off after it was about 1.5 years of work we made the deadline. Yeah, there's an impact to their customers, of course, because the way they build their systems, is consumed in the marketplace in this way we're talking about. But internally, the success of the company breeds enthusiasm, and it breeds like a continuity of, we're going to continue doing this because we can do it. So you see the success of meeting this initiative also fuels their desire to want to continue to do better and to keep it built into their processes. We always see that once it's done well and implemented, companies don't fall off if it's done truly well as part of a system. And I think that's a great use case to keep in mind. And then, worth mentioning, we just received a contract with a client who is on their 5th lawsuit. I wish we would have met them 5 years ago. We've only met them now. Working with the same overlay company. 5 lawsuits, Rob. It should never happen. And so, a couple $100,000 in settlements and lawyers' fees, and they're like, pain has motivated us. We want to do this from the ground up. So they're listening. They're like, where do we start? And so from first pixel down through their entire organization, they have become accessibility enthusiasts, right? They are advocates. So it's lovely to see the shift in buy-in when motivation is high.
Yeah, that's an important cautionary tale. But those are 3 great examples that kind of span the spectrum there. And I should have asked this a lot sooner, but you're making me want to ask, what are specific reasons people get sued when it comes to accessibility? Because I think there's probably a lot of companies out there that have not had this experience, and they just it may be something, to your point, it may be something that could protect someone listening right now from a lawsuit that maybe, something they don't even realize they're in violation of, or like, what are some examples of what triggers these lawsuits?
Yeah, I think I'm going to just skip like the technical side of it and just give some solid advice or like starting points to the audience. Firstly, the single most effective and the best thing an organization can do is have their team go and use the same free tools that the plaintiff attorneys are using to find the defects that are fueling these lawsuits. This is not by any means, foolproof, but it's going to take you off the chopping block. So whether it's using the Wave tool, XCore, Lighthouse, PowerMapper SortSite is a great tool. By just fixing the automatically detectable defects and having your team start there, it's going to do quite a few things. One, it's going to get you off of, the radar of a plaintiff attorney ran the tool, they found defects, they started that process. 2, it's going to get your internal teams talking about accessibility. They're going to be able to fix them, which boosts kind of morale, and there's a little bit of culture forming around that. And then it starts the conversation for what's next. And that's where Zenith can step in and be like, great, you've done 30% of the work here, because that's truly 30% is about what automatic tools can reliably detect if you pull out the false positives and you pull out duplicates. And what does real accessibility now look like at this point? So, and that's going to help them, on a higher level, it's going to help them fix low-hanging fruit, like the color contrast issues and the alt text, for image descriptions, some of the semantic HTML that needs to be there, some of the ARIA labeling, the way we code for screen readers, some of the tab indexing and keyboard criteria that might need to be met. But it's a great start in the right direction that can give a company a quick boost, and their internal teams can do it. They can also they can have Zenith step in for just a couple of hours to support their teams while they are fixing these automated issues. But it doesn't stand alone. It has to be followed up with the manual work that needs to be done to think of it like an iceberg. They've chipped away that 30% that's above the water, and now we need to go and get that 70%, below the surface.
That's really great advice. Just use the tools that these attorneys may be using to discover accessibility issues, just to have that peace of mind that what they're going to be seeing. So this has all been really fascinating. I learned a lot in this conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time. And how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to get started with Zenith? And what are some things, I think you mentioned them earlier, but what are some things that people can go, okay, I am in a good place to reach out? There's, you mentioned like they're maybe transitioning their website, or they're doing some other things like that. But yeah, hoping people can get in touch with you that really, understand the need.
Amazing. Thank you for asking. So we have built our own automated scanning tool. Anybody that wants a free scan, we're happy to run those across the entire site. It'll give you that 30% that we're talking about. Those free scans are helpful, help build an estimate so that you could understand time and cost. These are very important variables to have in the conversation of how an organization starts to approach accessibility. There is always a delta, a gap, right, between where you're at and where you want to go. So having us come in and just do this gap analysis, current tech stack, we are able to reduce cost and time to remediation by leveraging our platforms that we've built, our templates and themes and our accessible components. Sometimes most often we come into a project and we're able to plug in our components and save customers a lot of cash. So just having some visibility into what that roadmap might look like, very very powerful way to have the information to make these kind of decisions. Get your team rowing in the same direction. So reaching out to Zenith, find us on LinkedIn, find us on our website, ZenythGroup.com, fill out the free estimates or the free scan form, and we'll get right back to you with those results. And also, you can call, email. I don't know if you're going to leave some contact information after this recording, but we love to chat about accessibility. We're really, really good at digging in and building long-term relationships and moving this in a very elegant way. And, as accessibility purists, it's not about overkill, and it's not about trying to over-engineer. It's about doing this gracefully and correctly so that it can scale as our technology just continues to evolve.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And yes, we will put all of the contact information kind of in the show notes, depending on where you're watching. And thank you so much for sharing all of this, and hope it is beneficial to some of our listeners out there, and wishing you an awesome 2026. I have a good feeling about this one. So,
Rob, thank you. I've loved our conversation. It was good to connect, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to continuing the conversation with you as well.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch.